or riding on the beast with the 7 heads, basically representative of the 7 nations that have always oppressed the people of God, God having something specific and special to do with Babylon after the sealed judgments. There's 7 specifically that basically are poured out on the unbelieving world as far as the trumpet judgments and the vial judgments. When it's all over, 21 plagues or 21 judgments are cast upon the world during that time. The Jews themselves during that dispensation, God reaching for them. He remembers at the end of the chapter, he says suddenly God brings to mind Babylon. He's got something special or something specific for her. Unfortunately, we've always been told that this is the false religion, this great false religion that we try to exemplify as these groups that many people would refer to as the Muslims. I think evangelical Christians for a long time always put it on the Catholic Church, and everybody was always trying to put it on somebody else, where this religion in and of itself is more than just an organized Christian religion that we would think about per se. It's speaking more of a religion of power, a religion of money, a religion of financing. The criteria that is met as far as that latter portion of the 16th chapter as well as the 18th chapter speak of Babylon, or that religion being one of everything that people desire for, lust after, everything that everybody wants to desire and have, this system has. And I'll tell you, if you put that up against the Muslim nations, the Catholic Church, whichever other organization, organized religion people want to put on it, you'll find that it falls short tremendously. So we have come to find that there is another system that is at work even today, and it's a system that literally has been controlling or working in the background. Second Ezra makes it plain in his vision of this eagle. It's got 3 heads. The voice doesn't come from the head, it comes from the body. Literally a sense or a description of a power behind the power. And I think for a long time we've already understood that this is what's taking place. Now, last week we left off, and we read it in, I think, a few different sources. But we left off with Trotsky and Lenin coming back into Petrograd, in Russia. Basically all financed by the West. Max Warburg, Paul Warburg, the head of the Federal Reserve in America, as well as the head of the German banking system, the Reichsbank there in Germany. So we've left that off. We talked about where these fellas came from. Trotsky, this guy was basically in New York, having been exiled from Russia. He is actually allowed to return, as well as Lenin also returned in that sealed train that many people for the longest time never knew who financed it and who put all the money on the train with him. But it was the Western bankers. We learned last week, and we were talking about how a fellow like Frederick Engels, who basically co-wrote the Communist Manifesto. A lot of people always look at these documents and they think that these things are solely Russian, that they were made behind the Iron Curtain, that only a pervert of liberty would come up with such ideas of, communism, share the wealth, nobody has, nobody possesses, no ownership. And we've always looked at that from the Western mind and said, what a corrupt man to have come up with this. But it was all born out of the West. Engels being literally an Englishman, and Karl Marx himself being the son of a rabbi, Jewish. And we've always come to this idea that this was solely something that came from behind the Iron Curtain. These men were in France. They ended up in Belgium where they wrote it. And I'll tell you, it's one of those things that unfortunately they don't teach you in school. So what we're doing is basically laying out the backdrop. Whether or not it's something that you desire to put together, I think it's important for us to understand it, because as we read the book of Revelation, as we come to understand it, we have to literally have it in our minds, or understand in our minds what it is that this system of Babylon represents. It doesn't represent a religion per se as much as it does a religious system that has more to do with finances, more to do with money than it has to do with anything. Jesus himself said you can't serve God and serve mammon, literally making a delineating mark between that which we pursue the most, that which we desire in our lives. One of the things that God's people were always in trouble for was that they were always seeking their own above his. And God was always upset at that. He says, you seek your own. He says, you all live in your own sealed houses. You all want to take care of business at home, take care of all of what's yours and yours alone and your families. But he says the things of God always lay waste. So that which competes with God, or that religion which competes with God the strongest, isn't going to be some cult group or some other god. It usually is going to be money, that which we literally get nurtured from. So this is where we left off. So we're just going to close out this chapter real quick. Let's see. But where were Lenin and Trotsky when all this was taking place? Lenin went to Switzerland in Western Europe since 1905 when he was exiled for trying to topple the Tsar, abortive communist revolution of that year. Trotsky was in exile, a reporter for a communist newspaper, the Lower East Side of New York City. The Bolsheviks were not a political force at the time. The Tsar abdicated. And at that time he came to power not because the downtrodden masses of Russia called them back, but because very powerful men in Europe and the United States sent them in. And again, this is something that people just don't understand, that these guys just didn't show up and start a revolution. These people literally were financed and put back into the right place at the right time. We read a little bit about this. Lenin was sent across Europe during the time of war on the famous SEAL train. Lenin took $5 to $6 billion in gold. The whole thing was arranged by the German High Command and Max Warburg through another very wealthy lifelong socialist named Alexander Heplin, alias Parvus. Trotsky left New York aboard the SS Christiana on March 27, 1917 with his entourage of 275 revolutionaries. The first port of call was Halifax, Nova Scotia. And we read about that. We're just reviewing real quick. But remember, he got held in Nova Scotia. The immigration grabbed him and held him there until he got an American passport. And he was allowed to be let go because the confidant of Woodrow Wilson, Colonel House, arranged for him to be allowed to pass. The Germans, on the face of it, had a plausible excuse for financing Lenin and Trotsky. The two Germans most responsible for financing of Lenin were Max Warburg, a displaced Russian named Alexander Heplin. They could claim that they were serving their own country's cause by helping finance Lenin. However, these two German patriots neglected to mention to the Kaiser their plan to foment a communist revolution in Russia. The picture takes on another dimension when you consider the brother of Max Warburg was Paul Warburg, the prime mover in establishing the Federal Reserve System, and who from his position in the Federal Reserve Board of Directors played a key role in financing the American war effort. When news leaked out that in the American papers that brother Max was running German finances, Paul resigned from his Federal Reserve post without a whimper. From here on in, the plot gets sicker. The father-in-law of Max Warburg's brother Felix was Jacob Schiff, senior partner in Kuhn, Lieb and Company. Max ran the Rothschild operation in Frankfurt. Jacob Schiff also helped finance Leon Trotsky. According to the New York Journal of American, February 3, 1949, today it's estimated that Jacob's grandson John Schiff, that the old man sank about $20 million for the final triumph of the Bolshevik Revolution. The important part played by wealthy American banker Jacob Schiff in the events of Russia, though only partially revealed, is no longer a secret. General Alexander Nekvolodov is quoted by the Gulevich as stating in his book on the Bolshevik Revolution, in 1917, Jacob Schiff publicly declared it was thanks to his financial support that the revolution in Russia succeeded. In the spring of the same year, Schiff commenced to subsidize Trotsky. Simultaneously, Trotsky and company were also being subsidized by Max Warburg and Olaf Ashberg of Nybanken of Stockholm, the Rhine-Westphalian syndicate whose daughter was married to Trotsky. So all of these people, basically what it's doing is it's forming this network, and it's all coming out of the West. It's all coming even out of America. This whole system, or this whole idea of a communist revolution, the way it's always been taught, didn't happen that way. Schiff spent millions of dollars to overthrow the Tsar and millions to overthrow Kerensky. Now, stop and think about it. Why would Jacob Schiff, why would the Western bankers be concerned with overthrowing Trotsky? Now, we've already read that the Germans actually had rationale. The Germans were at war. They figured if we can cause a revolution in Russia, then we don't have to defend that front very well. We let them destroy themselves. So the Germans actually had a stake in letting them have revolution in Russia, then they don't have to fight them. But what interest did these American bankers have in Russia? Schiff spent millions to overthrow the Tsar and more millions to overthrow Kerensky. He was sending money to Russia long after the true character of the Bolsheviks was known to the world. Schiff raised $10 million supposedly for Jewish war relief in Russia, and we read about that in Pawns of the Game, how the Jews basically were being persecuted in Russia. But later events revealed it to be a good business investment. Schiff's participation in the Bolshevik Revolution, though quite naturally now denied, was well known among the Allied intelligence at the time. This led to much talk about Bolshevism being a Jewish plot. The result was that the subject of financing the communist takeover in Russia also became taboo. Later evidence indicates that the bankrolling of the Bolsheviks was handled through a syndicate of international bankers, which in addition to the Schiff-Warburg clique, included Morgan and Rockefeller interests. Now, did they ever teach you that in school? Think the Russians all know this? It says, statements show that Morgan organization put up at least $1 million in the Red Revolutionary Kitty. Still another important financier of the Bolshevik Revolution who was an extremely wealthy Englishman named Lord Alfred Milner. You remember Milner? Remember Milner's kindergarten in South Africa? He was the organizer and head of a secret organization called the Round Table Group, which was backed by Lord Rothschild. Degulovich goes on to reveal in private interviews he sent over 21 million rubles spent by Lord Milner in financing the Russian Revolution. It should be noted parenthetically that Lord Milner, Paul, Felix, Max Warburg represented their respective countries at the Paris Peace Conference. Now, if you think about it, why would you have bankers representing your country at the Paris Peace Party? Huh? You got Lord Milner, Paul and Max Warburg, and Felix representing their countries. Why would the bankers represent these countries in a peace party? Could you imagine Israel and Palestine sending bankers? Huh? To solve their problems? If we can somehow ascribe Max Warburg's financing of Lenin to German patriotism, it was certainly not patriotism which inspired Schiff. So basically Max Warburg, they're saying he has cause. He can be patriotic or deemed patriotic because in Germany you had to try to hold off the Russian front. So by financing a revolution in Russia, that would benefit the Germans. But the question is being asked, what benefit is it to Jacob Schiff, Morgan, Rockefeller? What benefit is it to them? I think you all know what benefit it is, right? Just money. If we can ascribe to Max Warburg's financing of Lenin to German patriotism, it was certainly not patriotism that inspired Schiff, Morgan, Rockefeller, Milner to bankroll the Bolsheviks. Both Britain and America were at war with Germany and were allies of Tsarist Russia. To free dozens of German divisions to switch from the Eastern Front to France and kill hundreds of thousands of American and British soldiers was nothing short of treason. In the Bolshevik Revolution, we see many of the same old faces that were responsible for creating the Federal Reserve System, initiating the graduated income tax, setting up the Federal Reserve, and setting up tax-free foundations and pushing us into World War I. However, if you conclude that this is anything but coincidental, your name will be immediately expunged from the social register. That means you're a dummy. No revolution can be successful without the organization and money. The downtrodden masses usually provide little of the former and none of the latter. Insiders at the top can arrange for both. Basically, it's telling you poor people can't finance a war like this. Why would these capitalists all do this? If your goal is global conquest, you have to start somewhere. It may or may not be coincidental, but Russia was one of the major European countries without a central bank. Now, if you stop and think of where all the wars are going on right now, do they have a central bank? I mean, really, think about it. Where's the central bank of Afghanistan? Central Bank of Iraq? Huh? Central Bank of Iran? I mean, I'm just tossing these things out for you to think about it, because when we view these things on the news, you know, you watch Fox News, they got that big segment called America at War. You ever see that? And you sit there and you watch these things, and everybody's sitting there watching, you know, these Palestinians blowing themselves up every day this week. And everybody sits there and looks at that and says, oh, look at what's going on. And it's funny how we lose Twin Towers in New York, and we declare war against the terrorist war, the terrorist countries, and yet Israel's getting people blown up every day, and everybody tells them to restrain themselves. Huh? Does that make sense? Well, what's going on? How come nobody turns Israel loose on folk? Don't you think they can deal with it? And there's only like 5 million. You know, there's only 5 million Israelis in that area. You know how many Arabs there are? Hundreds of millions. And they always make Israel the bad guy. They say, well, they got the military technology. They're Goliath, and the Arabs are David. That's what they say. I watch the news. I sit there listening to this. The Israelis are bullies. They got tanks. Really, you think tanks can stop 100 million Arabs? I'm just asking you to think about it, because we're seeing the exact same thing unfold here. You got an interest in Russia, mostly because they have no central bank. You got people pumping money into a revolution that's really none of their business except that they don't have a central bank. Now, I'll tell you the good news about this whole situation developing in the Middle East. Those Arab nations ain't going to get a central bank. It ain't going to happen. There's going to be some sellouts, and we've already read about those things. We already know that as far as the Muslim world in Egypt, they're sellouts. Turkey, sellouts. Huh? Pakistan, parts of Afghanistan. Some of these folk are sellouts. Sold out to the West in exchange for money. What would these capitalists, or why would these capitalists do all this? If your goal is global conquest, you have to start somewhere. It may be that, may or may not be coincidental, but Russia was the first major European country without a central bank. In Russia, for the first time, the communist conspiracy gained a geographical homeland from which to launch assaults against the other nations of the world. The West now had an enemy. In the Bolshevik Revolution, we had some of the world's richest, most powerful men financing a movement which claims its very existence is based on the concept of stripping the wealth from men like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Schiffs, Warburgs, Morgans, Harrimans, and Milners. Obviously, these men have nothing to fear of international communism. It's only logical to assume that if they financed it, they're not afraid of it because they probably control it. All right. We know this, however. A clique of American financiers not only helped establish communism in Russia, but has striven mightily ever since to keep it alive. Ever since 1918, this clique has been engaged in transferring money and, probably more important, technical information to the Soviet Union. This is abundantly clear in 3-volume History of Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development by scholar Anthony Sutton, Stanford University's Hoover Institute on War. Using, for the most part, official state documents, Sutton shows conclusively that virtually everything in Russia and everything the Soviets possess is acquired from the West. It's not an exaggeration to say that the USSR was made in the USA. We'll stop there. Y'all want to hear about Hitler? Y'all like Hitler? You don't have to like him. Talked a little bit about him last week. He's not the guy everybody tells you he is. I'm not telling you he's not a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's a rotten scoundrel. Possessed of the devil. All right. Pawns of the game, we're just going to close out Trotsky, Lenin, Marx. Lenin undertook to curb the power of the Jewish revolutionary leaders in Russia. He promised to take the Russian armies out of the war against Germany, providing the German government would help him overthrow the Russian provisional government and obtain political and economic control over the country. Now, should Lenin be able to do this, who does he owe his success to? Huh? He wants to overthrow the powers that be in Russia, but who got him there? So who does he get to pay back when he gets into power? Now again, I want you to understand that this continually mentions the Jews. But I want you to see, and I want you to understand that this is just a very small handful of men that have Jewish roots. And I would not even say they're Jewish to the extent that they completely work against everything Jewish, and they completely work against everything that would help the Jews as a people. In fact, they are probably more responsible for the extermination of Jews than they are in preserving the Jews. So one of the things that you have to be careful about as you read these things, and many of the white supremacists don't see it this way, but they view this as a Jewish conspiracy, and it's not a Jewish conspiracy. You can't even call these people Jews. They've got a religion, but it's money. So Lenin undertook to curb the power of the Jewish revolutionary leaders in Russia, because remember, we've already read this. The Jews and their revolution in Russia was one that began to topple even the balance of power. The Jews were even excelling in many things, and the Russians didn't like that. So Lenin undertook to curb the power of the Jewish revolutionary leaders against Russia. He promised to take the Russian armies out of war against Germany, providing the German government would help them overthrow the Russian provisional government to obtain political and economic control of the country. This deal was agreed to, and Lenin, Martov, Radek, and a party of 30 other Bolsheviks were secretly transported across Germany to Russia in a sealed railway compartment. They arrived in St. Petersburg on April 3rd. The Warburgs of Germany and the international bankers in Geneva provided the necessary funds. The Russian provisional government signed its own death warrant in 1917 when immediately after it was formed, it promulgated an order granting unconditional amnesty to all political prisoners. The amnesty included those in exile in Siberia and those who had sought refuge in countries abroad. This order enabled over 90,000 revolutionaries, most of them extremists, to re-enter Russia. Many of them were trained leaders. Lenin and Trotsky enlisted the vast influx of revolutionaries into their Bolshevik party. No sooner was Lenin back in power in Russia that he used this propaganda to attack the provisional government, which granted him his followers pardon. At the beginning of April, St. Petersburg Soviet, basically meeting at the Workers' Council, it was dominated by the Mensheviks, which is actually another group, the SRs, the Social Revolutionaries. Then came the Bolsheviks. For once, they were the minority group. The policy of the provisional government was to continue the war effort because the majority of Russians considered the totalitarian ambitions of German black Nazi warlords a direct threat to Russian sovereignty. Amongst the thousands of revolutionaries who returned to Russia following the general amnesty was Trotsky. He took back with him from Canada and the United States several hundred revolutionaries who had previously escaped from Russia. The vast majority were Yiddish Jews from East End of New York. How do you like that? These revolutionaries helped put Lenin into power. Now, why would a bunch of New York Jews go put Lenin into power in Russia? Let's find out. You don't learn this in school, huh? How come nobody wants to tell you about this? Bunch of Yiddish Jews from New York, huh? These revolutionaries helped put Lenin into power. Once these revolutionaries had served their purpose, most of them were condemned to death or exile. It was only a comparatively short time before all the original members of the First International were dead, prison, or in exile. The history of Lenin and Stalin dictatorships should convince any unbiased person that the mass of the world's population, regardless of color, creed, have been used as pawns in the game of international chess played by the red international bankers and the black Aryan Nazi warlords directed by the Illuminati, which is another group which referred to themselves as the Enlightened, and we'll stop there with that. Let's read about Hitler. We talked about this last week. We said we're going to talk about Hitler. As hard as it is to believe, for many Americans brought up on wartime propaganda film and publications devoted merely to war, technology, and battles, World War II was largely the result of infighting between secret occult societies composed of wealthy businessmen that eventually led into international tensions that provoked open warfare. Hear what this guy's saying? That World War II was basically infighting between occult societies? We don't believe that, huh? As in other conflicts, the manipulation and influence of these societies is found in the origins and finances of the war, not on the battlefields. Abundant evidence now shows and exists that World War II was brought on by agents and members of secret societies connected to the Illuminati, Freemasonry in Germany and Britain. It was this good war that the older mystic societies, seeking freedom from both church and state, merged with the modern secret societies concerned primarily with wealth and power and control. Sir Winston Churchill himself was insistent that the occultism of the Nazi Party should not, under any circumstances, be revealed to the general public, wrote author Trevor Ravenscroft, who claimed to have worked closely with Dr. Walter Johannes Stein, a confidential advisor to Churchill. The failure of the Nuremberg trials to identify the nature of the evil at work behind the outer facade of the National Socialism convinced him that another 3 decades must pass before a large enough readership would be present to comprehend the initiation rites and black magic practices of the inner core of Nazi leadership. Now, why would Winston Churchill not want to tell people that what drove the Nazi machine was an occult religion? What does Winston Churchill know about this occult religion stuff that he determines? And those, some of the best history ever written is written by Winston Churchill. If you want to read the history of the Anglo-Saxon, you read Winston Churchill. If you want to read about the history of war, you read Winston Churchill. Everybody knows you read Churchill. Why is this great scholar who wants to tell everything about everybody all of a sudden decide we don't want the world to know what spurred the Nazi movement? You would think if anybody wants to tell the truth, it's Sir Winston Churchill. Huh? Him and his little bulldog. Right? I think you already know about Winston Churchill. He was concerned as to why America wasn't coming into the war. And he starts asking questions like, how we get them into the war? What would happen if they sunk a cruise ship? This remarkable statement was corroborated by Ehrenave, one of the post-war Nuremberg prosecutors, who said the occult aspect of Nazi activities was ruled inadmissible because the tribunal feared both the psychological and spiritual implications in the Western nations. They also thought that such beliefs, so contrary to public rationalism, might be used to mount an insanity defense for the Nazi leaders. Now, Trevor Ravenscroft, he's the one that wrote The Spear of Destiny, talking about how Adolf actually had a pursuit for these icons. History identifies Adolf Hitler as a dominant figure in the war. So to understand the involvement of the secret societies, one must first understand Hitler and the origins of his Nazi party. Many books and articles, even TV specials have been produced documenting ties between Hitler's Nazis and occult societies. Few have made it plain that Hitler was their creation. So I guess Hitler didn't come up on his own, did he? To fully understand how and why Hitler was created, a close study must be made of all the secret groups operating around Hitler, as well as their connections to military intelligence services. Adolf Hitler's Nazis were far more than simply a political movement. They saw themselves leading a quasi-religious movement born both out of secret organizations whose goals were the same as those found in the Illuminati and Freemasonry. They were a cult, and as with a typical cult, its chief enemies were other cults. Hitler himself acknowledged this by stating, anyone who interprets National Socialism merely as a political movement knows nothing about it. It's more than a religion. It's the determination to create a new man. The Nazi cult grew from a variety of organizations, theologies, beliefs, present in Germany at the end of World War I, all stemming from the mysteries of the older groups such as the Bavarian Illuminati, the German Orden, Freemasonry, and the Teutonic Knights. A prerequisite for grasping the background of it is to understand the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, also known as the Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, a list of procedures for world domination. This document may have wreaked more havoc than almost any other piece of literature in history. This is something that leaked out from the Masonic group. A vision of the protocols first appeared in 1864 in France in a book entitled Dialogue in Hell Between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, or The Politics of Machiavelli in the 19th Century by a contemporary. It was written anonymously by a French lawyer named Maurice Joly and taken as political satire against the Machiavelli-inspired machinations of Napoleon III. Joly reportedly was a friend of Victor Hugo, and both were members of the Order of the Rose Croix, which is basically the Rosicrucians, a secret society that may have influenced his writing. Joly's identity was discovered, and he received a 15-month prison sentence, and his impertinence of his book was almost forgiven. By the mid-1890s, Joly's obscure book was rewritten and augmented with anti-Semitic material on the orders of the Russian Okhrana, the Tsar's secret police. It was added to the work of a religious writer named Sergei Nilus, who published to coincide with the founding of the first Zionist movement, seeking to return to Palestine in 1897. The protocols were included as an appendix to Nilus's book, partially titled The Antichrist is Near at Hand. The objective was to relieve public pressure on the Tsar by portraying the Russian revolutionaries as pawns in an international Jewish conspiracy. The document purported that a clique of Jews and Freemasons would join forces to create a one-world government by means of liberalism and socialism, a conspiratorial theory still alive in some quarters. The protocol still chills readers with its prophetic descriptions and methodology for tyranny by a few. The message is fits quite well with the elitist outlook of men like Cecil Rhodes and the Rothschilds. Now, I don't know if we're going to read those, but the protocols literally speak in terms as Colonel House's Philip Drew Administrator. We've talked a little about him. In Philip Drew Administrator, and I think I've asked some of you guys if you've been able to pick one of these up. It's about $11. You can probably pick it up from Amazon. Philip Drew becomes an administrator. He basically begins to lay down the new government. And everything that he laid down as a government of socialism or a pure form of communism is basically what's outlined also in these protocols. in essence, what's taking place is they're saying this is the formula for ruling the world. Philip Drew lays it out, and we've already talked about how much of it is already in place in America. So let's read a little more. The protocol still chills readers with its prophetic description of methodology for tyranny by a few. Its message fits quite well with the elitist outlook of men like Cecil Rhodes and the Rothschilds. We are chosen, we are the only true men. This is a quote from them. Our minds give off the true power of the Spirit. The intelligence of the rest of the world is merely instinctive and animal. They can see, but they cannot foresee. Their inventions are merely corporal. Does it not follow that nature herself has predestined us to dominate the whole world, is what's stated in the protocols. Now listen, I've told you from the beginning, these men are not evil men per se. They truly believe they are illuminated and called to save the world. And that they really believe this. I mean, you don't think that guys like George W. just sit in office and think that this is an accident. These men believe this is destiny. They don't sit there and say, oh, Jesus, I barely got this election. These men believe this is destiny, that this is God's call. That doesn't make them insincere. That doesn't make them devil worshipers. But they truly believe that they're better. How can you be the leader of a communist state saying, I am the administrator that doles out to everybody? Who gave him the wisdom to know who to give to what and what to give to who and all that other stuff? These people really believe. Cecil Rhodes wasn't playing. Milner wasn't playing. These men believe this. Do you believe that? Does it not follow that nature herself has predestined us to dominate the whole world, state the protocols? Outwardly, however, in our official utterances, we shall adopt the opposite procedure and do our best to appear honorable and cooperative. A statesman's word do not have to agree with his acts. If we pursue these principles, the governments and the peoples which we have thus prepared will take our IOUs for cash. One day they will accept us as benefactors and saviors of the human race. If any state dared to resist us, if its neighbors make common cause with it, will unleash a world war. The protocols goes on to explain that the goal of world domination will be accomplished by controlling how the public thinks, by controlling what they hear, by creating new conflicts and restoring old orders, by spreading hunger, destitution, plague, and seducing and distracting the youth. Well, let me see. Has any of that happened? Let's see. World domination accomplished by controlling how the public thinks. Yeah, we got the media. Who owns the media? Who runs the media? Just happens to be these same fellas, huh? By controlling what they hear. I've often said, look, they can't really make you think of anything, but they can tell you what to think about, right? Creating conflicts. How do you create conflicts? I can think of just the conflicts in this country. What's the number one conflict that's plaguing our country today? It's racism. Now, really, I mean, and racism, doesn't it seem solely American? You go to other countries, and the black fella says, I'm British. You go to Mexico, and the black fella says, I'm Mexican. But you come to America, and everybody's what? African-American, Mexican-American, Chinese-American, Philippine-American. Everybody's all screwed up over here. Creating new conflicts. I mean, think about it, man. Homosexuals go around telling everybody they're 10% of the population. They're more like 1%. How does less than 1% get the whole world so shook up that everybody wants to go beat up a homosexual? Huh? I mean, you know, these fellas, they're such small percentile. They can go marry each other. Nobody will ever give a rat's behind. But suddenly that becomes a main conflict. I mean, could you imagine Bill Clinton steps into office the first thing he wants to do is by executive order turn over certain abortion laws and let gays be serving in the military. Well, how come that was the first agenda of that guy? Huh? 1% of the population. You know, homosexuals, they're a funny group. And I'll tell you, look, if they're 1% of the population and 99% of the population is heterosexual, heterosexuals are full of crap. Because homosexuals aren't wrecking the country, are they? I mean, you notice every sitcom on television got homosexuals in it? Huh? Some of you ladies, your hair wouldn't look so good if it wasn't for homosexuals. Huh? Them actresses in Hollywood wouldn't look so good if it wasn't for homosexuals. Homosexuals ain't wrecking our country. That's such a small... Why do people think homosexuals are wrecking our country? Why is homosexuality such a big thing in our country? Huh? There's 99%, there's just a figure, about 99% people heterosexual. They're wrecking our country worse than homosexuals. Got a 51% divorce rate. Heterosexuals go around knocking up girls and not taking responsibility for their babies, don't they? Huh? Heterosexual fathers leave their kids and don't come back and leave them there to fend for themselves. Huh? Why is the world beating up on homosexuals when it's the heterosexuals that are screwing the world up? Huh? Should we be worried about homosexuals? Oh, he's a homo. He's a homo. Everybody getting all bent out of shape. Who didn't know Rosie O'Donnell wasn't gay? I must be a prophet. I've been telling you for years she's a lesbian. Who didn't know Rosie O'Donnell wasn't a lesbian? Huh? And everybody come out. She's out of the closet, more like out of the garage. Who didn't know she wasn't a lesbian? Why is this such a big deal? She's out of the closet. Who cares? I knew she was a lesbian when she started playing with Madonna and Sandra Bernhard. Who didn't know she was a lesbian? So why is the media telling us all this? They just want to distract you, don't they? Folk want you thinking about other things, creating conflicts. Homosexuals ain't a problem. People always ask me, what do you think of homosexuals? I don't think that. I don't even think about them. What you think of homos? Well, I don't. Somebody says, you want to save them? No, not particularly. Well, that's me. That's not God. If God wants to save, if you let him. Somebody got to decorate them pearly gates. All right. They control what you hear, create new conflicts, restore old orders, spread hunger, destitution, plagues, seducing, and distracting the youth. I don't have to tell you about how the youth are distracted, do I? Youth are all messed up. By all these methods, we shall so wear down the nations that they will be forced to offer us world domination, they proclaim. Some of the 24 protocols bear a brief summary. If any part of them are to be believed, they provide a clear connection to Freemasonry and the ancient mysteries, as well as the amazing roadmap for world conquest. Because the protocols were rewritten and attributed to Jews before World War I with the intent of inciting anti-Jewish sentiment, their use of the term goyim, a demeaning Jewish word for non-Jews, has been substituted with the term masses. Pertinent points include: the protocol plan will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength. So if they're not fighting for territory, what are they fighting for? Huh? If you're not fighting for land, what are you fighting for? Money. The minds of the masses must be diverted toward industry and trade. Thus all the nations will be swallowed up with the pursuit of gain and won't take note of their common foe. Now you can even reduce that on a smaller scale. You know why Christians in this world can't get themselves to church and get themselves busy with the things of God? Because all they care about is pursuing their own gain. It's just another form of religion. It's just another form of worship. Go around chasing dollars. Go around chasing money. Go around chasing the things that do nothing but serve our own purposes. The minds of the masses must be diverted toward industry and trade. Now, why would you do that? Have everybody run around chasing money. We shall create an intensified centralization of government. All you got to do is look at Europe. We must develop a super government by representing it as the protector and benefactor of all those who voluntarily submit. We shall soon begin to establish monopolies. Now, again, this was written back before World War I. The intensification of armaments and increase of police forces, so that in all states of the world, besides ourselves, there will only be masses of the proletariat, which are workers, a few millionaires devoted to our interests, police and soldiers. That's Protocol 7. We shall put government power in the hands of persons whose past and reputations are such that between them and the people lies an abyss. Persons who, in case of disobedience to our instructions, must face criminal charges. Now, listen to this one. You'll like this one. We must put government power in the hands of persons whose past and reputations are such between them and the people there lies an abyss. So there's going to be a great differentiation between these people who run the show and you. So tell me this isn't like the priests of the old Catholic order who says, the masses know nothing, we know everything. We read the books, we interpret the books, you know nothing. There's got to be such a vast difference between these people. This is why even in our government, as great as our government is, this whole idea of representation is starting to shift towards almost a demagogish type of system where we elect people into power and they now make decisions for us despite what we want. Because they know better, they're more enlightened. This is why even in institutions such as schools, the teacher knows more than you as the parent. They know what to tell your kid. We have fooled, bemused, and corrupted the youth of the masses by rearing them in the principles and theories which are known to us to be false. That's Protocol 9. Now let me ask you a question. Protocol 9. We have fooled, bemused, and corrupted the youth of the masses by rearing them in principles and theories which are known to be false. Now let me ask, why would any teacher in a good conscience lie to somebody? It's because they don't know. They're just puppets. You think a teacher, listen, let me just take a break here, and forgive me if somebody's a teacher, but these have got to be some of the most stupid people on the planet. Listen, I don't know one single elementary school teacher that knows sufficient about the rainforest to be teaching any kid, especially mine, how to save it. Unless they've been sleeping under some tree in the rainforest, getting bit by bugs and ants that eat your flesh, I don't want to hear it. What the hell does a teacher know about saving dolphins? Huh? Really, what does an elementary school teacher know about dolphins? Huh? At least I know what one tastes like. Anybody want to eat dolphin? They used to sell it. They still do? That won't make you a star in elementary school, huh? What does an elementary school teacher know about the war in Afghanistan? Think about it. Well, elementary school teacher. Huh? You know, they took tests and they passed legislation where they said we need to qualify and requalify teachers because our kids, they're not learning very well. And in Texas, they gave the teachers a test, and almost all of them, a whole bunch of them flunked. I think about half of them flunked. I don't just say this to beat up the teachers, but if a protocol in this plan is to fool, bemuse, and corrupt the youth by teaching them principles and theories that are lies, don't you think people that teach should at least be aware of what they're doing? Huh? Save the forest. Don't use hairspray because it has aerosol that puts holes in the ozone layer. Then these stupid teachers don't know every time a volcano erupts, burns big holes in the ozone. And every time a volcano erupts and burns a big hole in the ozone layer, that the ozone layer heals itself. Get all these people spraying pump sprays when you don't have to. Huh? They say things like, we're actually getting rid of all the forest land. Don't have any idea that we've actually replenished more forest land, that there's more forest land in the United States today than there was before the timbermen got here. How come teachers don't tell the kids that? So they're teaching them things they know is a lie. Why do they do that? Huh? Why do teachers sit there in school and tell your kids, we're all the same, we need to respect each other? Huh? I think we need to respect each other as human beings, but if 25% of Hispanic men are drunks, I have no respect for that. Huh? If a Middle Easterner beats his wife, I have no respect for that. If a white dude decides he wants to go out there and lay up with all the gals on the block and leave his wife and kids starving, I got no respect for that. If an American Indian decides he wants to go out to the corner store and spend his whole check on firewater, I got no respect for that. But these teachers stand in the classroom over your kids and tell them what? We're all the same. And we're not. And your kid, if he sits next to a Chinese kid that's good in math, knows we're not the same. He just don't know what to make of it yet. Huh? Your kid sits in class next to other kids from other ethnicities and goes, hey, what's up with Rahib? Your kid knows he's not the same. But why does that teacher stand there in front of him and try to act like they're the same? Huh? Now, aren't these obvious lies? So why do the teachers keep teaching them? I'm just bringing it up. I tell people you ought to be frightened with your kid in school. My kid goes to a Christian school, and they're full of just as much crap. They tell you about Jesus, but you know, they're drawing dolphins too. We shall destroy among the masses the importance of the family and its educational value. Why do you need to destroy the family? Because the family is nothing more than the core, not only the core image of God to Christians, but the family is literally the core of any civilization. The stronger the family units are, the stronger civilization. If you can break apart families, you break down a civilization. We shall destroy among the masses the importance of the family. Let me ask you this. And again, in the 60s with Women's Lib, what'd they tell women? They told women, you can be liberated. I forgot what jackass woman it was that went around saying, women have other vocations other than just being wives and mothers. As if it's a job description. Huh? We're going to liberate women, and they're going to have opportunity and choices of vocations. They could have a variety of vocations. And what did they do? They said, we're going to liberate women. And what happened to these liberated women? What happened when women got liberated? Really think about it. What did liberation mean? Liberation meant you can have all the sex you want, you just don't have to get married. Now, I got to admit, I was a young man back then. Yeah, go women. Because in essence, with their liberation came my liberation from any responsibility to them. Because back in the day, you knock one up, you ring the bell, you had to buy the prize. But now that they're liberated, you ain't got no responsibility, do you? Back then, if you had a kid out of wedlock, everybody said, who's the bastard? Huh? Who's the bastard? Everybody, oh, we don't say that anymore. Wait a minute, you don't say that anymore. How come? He's not illegitimate anymore? Well, no, we don't need a family. We don't need a family. We got role models and substitutes. So these women have been liberated, and they're still paying a very high price for their liberation, aren't they? How can you be liberated and then shaft a dude for child support? Does that sound like liberation? Alimony? Does that sound like liberation? Fastest growing poverty segment in the country? Single motherhood? And then rather than to go back and say, we need to reinstitute the family, everybody says, we need more programs for single mothers. We need daycare. Isn't it funny as you read these, you're thinking, hey, somebody's pretty good at these things. We shall destroy among the masses the importance of the family and its educational value. We have invented this whole policy and insinuated it into the minds of the masses to obtain in a roundabout way what is unattainable by a direct road. It is this which has served the basis for organization of secret masonry, which is not known to, and aims which are not even so much as suspected by these cattle, attracted to us by the show of army of Masonic lodges. to throw the dust in the eyes of their fellows. So basically, they're hiding a secret. People just too dumb to know it. That's Protocol 11. What is the part played by the press today? It serves selfish ends. It is often vapid, unjust, mendacious, and the majority of the public have not even the slightest idea to what ends the press really serves. We shall saddle and bridle it with a tight curb. Not a single announcement will reach the public without our control. That's Protocol number 12. Now, you think these people aren't serious? The need for daily bread forces the masses to keep silent and be our humble servants, in order that the masses themselves may not guess guess what they are about. We further distract them with amusements, games, pastimes, passions, people's palace. There wasn't no TV at that time, by the way. Soon we shall begin through the press to propose competitions in art, sports of all kinds. Isn't that wild? Somebody came up with this? This is before all this, this is before Bruce Springsteen can fill a soccer stadium. Huh? This is before television and moving pictures. As far as those productions we see, isn't that something? They go distract the masses. They go keep them silent. How you keep them silent? You ain't going to get no bread. It will be undesirable for us that there should exist any other religion than ours. Now, finally somebody told the truth about this. This is a religion. We've talked about this is a religion. Listen, when you reach into your pocket and pull out your money and read it says Federal Reserve note on top of it, what that basically means is that piece of paper doesn't have anything to back it up. And yet you'll go put in 40 hours every week expecting to get some of that. Expecting not only to get some, but expecting that you can spend it on stuff. Now, if that ain't faith, I don't know what is. It don't have nothing backing it up. It's a piece of paper. There'll be no religion but ours. We must therefore sweep away all other forms of belief. Wow. How do you sweep away all other forms of belief? Huh? Well, you use the media. You use the schools. What else do these people control? They control the bread. Huh? These people ain't playing. It will be undesirable for us that there should exist any other religion than ours. We must therefore sweep away all other forms of belief. That's Protocol 14. Freedom of conscience has been declared everywhere, so that now only years divide us from the moment of the complete wrecking of the Christian religion. As to other religions, we shall still have less difficulty in dealing with them. So the hardest religion they have to deal with is Christianity. But listen to what their angle on Christianity is. We must therefore sweep away all other forms of belief. That's Protocol 14, but Protocol 17 is freedom from conscience has been declared everywhere. What does that mean? That means you can do whatever you want and doesn't, who cares? See, this is why, again, somebody says, yeah, she's a lesbian. We go, oh, that's cool. Oh, he's a drunk. To each his own. Huh? Oh, yeah, man, she lost a bunch of weight smoking crack. Oh, whatever, rocks her boat. Nobody wants to come up to them and say anything. We were talking about how one of the protocols is to destroy the family unit. You ever notice it's a lot easier, again, 1% of the population is gay. Why does everybody beat up on them? Huh? It's easier to beat up on gays because most of us ain't. Huh? How come nobody beats up on divorcees? Because either we're divorced or we know somebody that we're close to that's been. And if we start talking bad about people who divorce, what happens? Think people get mad at us? Think they'll go invite you over for turkey? Huh? How come there's certain things that people don't want to talk about? When a girl gets pregnant and has a baby, when she's not married, nobody wants to say a word to her. I mean, it doesn't matter that statistics show that baby, doesn't matter what significant other decides to step in and play daddy. Huh? He got a ding-dong, he'll work. Huh? He could step, everybody says, oh yeah, we're going to fix things. We're going to provide him with money and clothes and support. Oh, look at us. How come nobody wants to say it's wrong? The statistics are in. There ain't no myth. Kids grow up angry, tremendous rage, don't do as well in school, have a more likely chance of getting knocked up themselves if they're girls, or getting girls pregnant if they're boys, on top of the fact that if it's a boy, they usually beat people. 9 out of 10 of the violent criminals in our country are from a house that don't have a dad in it. Not a man, a dad. Majority of women that get beaten by boyfriends, not husbands. But nobody talks about that either. How come? How come nobody talks about the things that you should be talking about, but they want to beat up on homos? Huh? Homos aren't wrecking this country, heterosexuals are. Homos aren't the root of our problem in this country, it's heterosexuals. There's people who actually think that they're doing good, when all along what they've done is bad. And what is the protocol? We want to get rid of all conscience. The hardest of the religions to get rid of is which one? Christianity. What does Christianity deal with? The death of Jesus to cleanse your consciousness, right, of sin. Why do they hate Christianity? Because of Jesus. Now, what is their religion? Who competes the closest with Jesus? Mormons? Catholics? Jews? Money. When we at last definitely come into our kingdom by the aid of the coup d'etat prepared everywhere, for one and the same day we shall make it our task to see to it, or to see that against such things as plots no longer exist. With this purpose we shall slay without mercy all who take up arms in hand to oppose our coming. Anything like a secret society will be punishable with death. Isn't that funny? You start out a secret society, now you want to kill them all. That's Protocol 15. In our program, 1/3 of the masses will be kept under observation from a sense of duty on the principle of volunteer service to the state. Hey, isn't that a good way to control people? Y'all serving. Now, a lot of you don't remember. Some of you do, because it wasn't too long ago. But right before Bill Clinton left office, he was saying, I promise, you remember his last State of the Union address, I promise that everybody is going to get an opportunity to go to college, and the only way they're going to go to college is to serve the state. Now, see, that's not too far from happening. I think George W. likes the idea. These are good protocols, aren't they? If you're going to take over the world. It will no longer be a disgrace to be a spy and informer, but a merit. Hey, listen to this. Right now, we live in a rat society. If you go like this in school and a kid rats on you, you're gone. If you come over and say, Whitney, there was a gay dude and a blonde, and you start telling blonde and gay jokes in work, what happens? They fire you. If you walk over and say, hey, man, I was asking Sandra out for a date, and they rat on you, they get promoted because they just saved the money for a potential sexual harassment. We live in a country full of rats. Listen, this is what I hate. I used to hate those commercials because my kids would be watching cartoons, and then that stupid cartoon McGruff would come out. Hey, are your neighbors smoking dope? Huh? Do you see suspicious people? Call the cops. My kid ain't no rat. Huh? You know, the cops come to school and show the kids marijuana. Any of you ever see this at home? Yeah, I do. Huh? No, parents are jerk-offs if they, smoking weed in front of their kids. But it's even worse to turn people's kids into rats. I don't need to tell you, we live in a snitch society now. Everybody wants to snitch. I got a friend who buried a dog in the backyard and had to hide. Because there's ordinances against that. He didn't want to have his dog thrown in the back of a flatbed and, burnt. It will be no disgrace to be a spy or an informer. They call them whistleblowers now, huh? Isn't that funny? Back then it was a rat. Huh? Snitch. And now it's cool. You're a hero. Unless you rat on the wrong people. Linda Tripp wasn't popular for being a rat, was she? It's no disgrace to be a spy and informer, but of merit. How else are we to increase disorders? That's Protocol 17. Sedition mongering is nothing more than the yapping of a lapdog at an elephant. In order to destroy the prestige of heroism for political crime, we shall send it for trial in the category of thieving, murder, and every kind of abominable and filthy crime. Public opinion, then, brand it with the same contempt. That's protocol number 9. Now, could you imagine public opinion being branded with contempt? What y'all think? Nobody wants to hear it. Until dissenters commit some overt act, we shall not lay a finger on them, but only introduce into their midst observation elements. That's spying. Tell me that. Tell me people ain't spied on today. Huh? Latter protocols deal with finances. Protocol 20 called for general taxation. That happened. Lawful confiscation of sums of money for every kind of regulation of their circulation in state. This would be followed by a progressive tax on property, like ours. Finally, a graduated income tax. That happened. Tax increasing in percentage ratio to capital. That happens. As well as taxes on sales, receipt of money, inheritance, and property transfers. That happens. There is also a discussion of the substitution of interest-bearing paper. That's what happened. Money since economic crises have been produced by us, by no other means than the withdrawal of money from circulation. The protocols discuss at length loans, which it states hang like the sword of Damocles over the head of rulers who, instead of taking from their subjects by a temporary tax, come begging with outreached palms to bankers. Whoever produced the protocols clearly understood the secrets of banking. In it, a passage which could have been titled The National Debt of the United States, Protocol 20 states, a loan is an issue of government bills of exchange containing a percentage of obligation or interest commensurate to the sum of the loaned capital. It proceeded to explain that if the loan bears a charge of 5%, hefty interest in those to those more knowledgeable in times, then in 20 years of the state it vainly pays away the interest, a sum equal to the loan borrowed. In 40 years it will pay double the sum, in 60 triple, and all the debt remains unpaid to be paid at a later date. The writer also determined that no one would figure out what was happening, because it's a secret. We shall so hedge about our system of accounting that neither ruler nor most insignificant public servant will be in a position to divert even the smallest sum from its destination without detection or direct it to another direction. The protocols demonstrate a linkage to the ancient mysteries referring to the bloodlines such as the seed of David, secret mysteries, and even the symbolic snake, an icon of earliest cults. Now we'll stop there. Now again, I know we said we're going to talk about Hitler, but we are talking about Hitler. All right? Because again, to understand Hitler, where he's coming from, you got to understand what's taking place, what brought him in. So that's it. We're done today. Any questions? Yeah, Peanut?